thank you so much for coming. I know it was hard to get here, and we appreciate it. I came actually all the way from Chile. So to all of the ones missing out there, I will say it is completely worth it to be here today. So thanks for coming. I have the honor to actually be moderating a discussion that couldn't probably have better panelists. Rob and Daniela not only have hands-on experience with building products that use artificial intelligence, but they also worked before with these products, so they have experience working in different environments with different teams. Both of them have raised capital. Probably Daniela is one of the few women raising so much capital. She raised around 50 million in the Series B as the CEO of Defined.AI. And Rob, is this his third company? He exited the prior two, and he raised already over $30 million for one side and a little bit less on the other side, because he has a very interesting structure for the AI Foundation or the Artificial Intelligence Foundation. So we only have 40 minutes, so I want to take as much time just listening from them, and if there are questions, you can ask at the end. There's a mic. Hashtag CES 2022. Our bios and Twitter handles are on the app. Rob Meadows at Twitter. Mine is Jimena Herzog, and Daniela, yours is your Twitter handle?
I think it's Braga 59.
Okay, all right. So Rob,
51.
I'm gonna start with you. So you are the CEO, founder of the Artificial Intelligence Foundation. It sounds like a nonprofit, but actually is a very interesting structure of both, a for-profit and nonprofit arm. Can you tell us a little bit about what the foundation does, what products do you build, and why do you use that structure for your business?
Yeah. So yeah, we're structured as a dual for-profit and a nonprofit entity that work together but have separate governance and checks and balances. So, the idea is to democratize the access to the most powerful AI tools, technologies, et cetera, but to do that in a responsible way. We set up a nonprofit that gets access to anything that we develop, any new technology, and the goal of the nonprofit is to make sure it's done in a responsible way. It gets in the hands of all 8 billion people in the world, and we automatically get access to all technology that's developed in the for-profit. So it's a very synergistic model, but keeps that checks and balance between, investor goals of return on investment and, the altruistic goals of democratization of this technology. So, yeah, I think OpenAI has a similar model, but it's not easy to set up, but we think it's the future of how companies should kind of govern themselves.
Daniela, tell us about your company, Defined.AI, and it seems she's a very interesting entrepreneur. She has actually a doctorate in linguistics and tech linguistics, which is very interesting to me. So if you can tell us a little bit about your company, the products, just like Rob did, but also how was that journey moving from Microsoft and all of the other things you did after that, and from actually working in research, in academia, you taught at the University of Washington, to becoming one of our leading women in AI entrepreneurship?
Well, Defined.AI is a data company for artificial intelligence in the human-computer interaction space. So we simulate data using crowdsourcing and synthetic data techniques to simulate, so basically to recreate voice, text, collections in 50 languages over 100 countries, and the image and video component of that. So when humans are talking to each other, we have language that comes through a voice signal, but we have a whole processing behind the scenes that our brains do automatically, that we learn to do that as babies, and we watch each other and we understand the paralinguistic around it. So what we do is simulate the data that we use in our brains to process this type of communication. So it's one of the hardest problems in the world to solve. AI is a broad area, and Defined.AI is in the field of providing responsible, transparent, accurate data in a consistent way across languages and computer vision applications. How did I get here? And the interesting part is that I could only, the success of Defined.AI could only be reached with this combination of disciplines. Back in the days when I started 21 years ago, I was an academic, a researcher, coming from a linguistic background, starting on venturing herself in an engineering world where this field didn't exist pretty much. In Europe back then, there was only one track to go and no discipline overlap. I ended up doing a PhD in voice technologies, which was already in that intersection. Again, the US was already starting to be, well, the US was there already, but still in the R&D world. I did the first synthetic, together with my team back in 2000, the year 2000, the first synthetic text-to-speech voice application for blind people in Portuguese, the first one ever, and since then, now you have Siri talking to you. That was not mainstream applications at that time. 10 years ago, Microsoft brought me to Seattle because found me as one of the researchers doing that. I worked 7 years with Microsoft in the cutting edge technologies of voice and human-computer interactions. 10 years ago, Microsoft brought me to Seattle, and 3 years later, I started Defined.AI, which could only be possible with the intersection of cultures. I lived in 3 continents, China included. Intersection of backgrounds, academia, industry, and doing a startup from scratch, and understanding human communication.
Thank you. So we have this title here, AI and equity, using AI to create a diverse workforce and inclusive world. What does that say to you, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, the vision that I have and the AI Foundation has is that the power in the future, the financial wealth of the future, et cetera, is going to rely a lot on AI to generate, if not completely all generated by AI. So making sure that everyone is included, everyone comes along for that ride is really what we see in an inclusive world. But to be able to get there, to be able to build AI that can be in the hands of 8 billion people, it really starts with diversity in the workforce, hiring people who can think about how everyone in the world can leverage technology. And that's kind of the emergent beginning of fully inclusive world. So to me, they go hand in hand.
So when we hear about AI ethics, what does that mean for the two of you in the companies that you have? And how do you create products? What does it mean to do it as a technologist? Because we have people in the room here probably work in startups or have startups or work in companies that are doing similar work. But what does it mean to use AI ethics or to have a moral compass around AI?
You definitely want to go first.
Ethics doesn't equal to bias, doesn't equal to responsibility or transparency in AI. Ethics, for me, is one of those dilemma questions that don't have a right answer or wrong answer. So the AI, ethical AI, is one of those things where you have an autonomous vehicle, you're in a crossroad, you are about to have an accident. Do you hit the child, the pet, or the old person? None of those Right. So that's the ethical part of AI. It's not, honestly, I am avoiding all the time to have, because I'm not a philosopher, I'm not going to respond to what is right or wrong in these types of things. What we care about is transparency on AI, unbiased AI, and making sure that all of these things come through the diversity of the data, the diversity of the people in the teams, which right now is just a vision. It's not even there, right? You see that still today there's only 5% of women who graduate AI PhDs. There's only, not to mention in the entrepreneur world, only 2% of women actually have access to VC capital. 2% of women, not in AI, everywhere. It's just the teams building AI are male and white mostly, so it's really, we're very far from achieving an unbiased world. The data is one of the parts that are more important, and we can't control. We can control and understand what it's in there, at least traceability back in models, but ethics, and it's a different thing.
So you Rob, have like the other background, right? Like she's a woman, is been all over the world, but you are what lots of people aspire to be in America. The technologist started 11 years old, coding. He actually created a straw, light, like, you put in a party at home. He did it on his computer, and then people will send him money from all over the world paying for that. So you could actually, through his program, kids all over the world were using it to do parties in the room and turn on and off the lights. So I thought that was super cool. But that story, that trajectory of love for computers, love for technology, could have taken you in the path that many others have, where it's just for a profitable side of technology, right? So when you talk about inclusion, you being a white male, have a master's degree in computer science, kind of like that traditional path, why this matters to you when you have the 98% of the funding, when you have all these other things, and you still fight for the rest of us, and not just for workforce, but for everything else?
I mean, it's all about the ride, not the end destination. I think it's no fun if you don't surround yourself with amazing people that can bring other perspectives and, just make it fun, make it interesting, make it more challenging. There's nothing fun about just taking the easy route there. So yeah, I've always looked to build the most diverse workforce, and yeah, it's still very, very hard to hire women and people of color that have the backgrounds that we need to do what we're doing, but we actively seek that out. We actively recruit at schools you wouldn't normally go to, not just the Stanfords and MITs. We look to pull that together. I just think it's more fun that way. I think it's more fun to do it with a group of people that see the world differently than me, struggle with things that are different than I do.
They see things you don't see.
Yeah. I have more blind spots than anybody.
We know that's a big problem, the talent shortage at around 10.5 million job openings in the US. We have about 9.4 people looking for jobs that they don't have the skills for those jobs. So we have a huge problem where we have a lot of people that are left outside of the tech industry, but at the same time, we need a lot of talent in the tech industry. So we keep hearing about new companies in human resources that claim to provide very effective tools to bring more diversity into the workforce. And then we often hear that the opposite is happening, and there is a lot of horror stories out there of ways to discriminate against that these technologies are using. So tell us a little bit about the technologies that are used for human resources. Are those all evil? Is there a way to do them right?
Comes down to data again. The technologies are not evil. They don't have the right data. Recently.
But how do they get the right data? What are the
What I defend is that we should not develop any technology until we have the data. So if there's no representation of women in tech jobs or in AI jobs or in assembly line jobs, whatever the field is, if there's not enough representation of women or in the credit scores for application for mortgages applications, we should not develop one, or at least monitor every result by humans until the model learns and has enough representation of that demographics. There are things we can simulate, and we simulate a lot of the data that goes into models because they just don't exist. But there are things you can simulate, like women and people of color for the last 30 years buying houses, because they just don't have that in representation that is meaningful for a model. Same thing with applications in the engineering world. There's still only 20% of women graduating engineering, and 45% of those women in the first year after graduation in the States give up on their careers. It's just, there's not enough data.
So what do you tell, Rob, to companies that use those tools?
Well, yeah, I'll give a couple examples here. I actually think AI can do a lot to help with a lot of the biases in the hiring process and in the workplace. So for example, everybody we hire does a first interview with an AI. So we've built a digital human platform that can create AIs that look like you, talk like you, have conversations. So we've done our best to not build any bias into the AI. So it's pretty easy to eliminate conscious bias. It's very, very hard to eliminate unconscious bias in people. You know, everybody's background, how they grew up, and families had an influence on that. But AI has no unconscious bias if you build it right. So just taking a first unbiased conversation assessment of everybody, then we kind of start everybody out at a level. You know, then we have to coach people through, you know, how do we look for not just your traditional set of, you know, check these boxes and, you know, these skills. You know, we look for potential. So I think a lot of companies are not putting in the work that they should to find people that may not know anything about the job you want them to do, but have the potential. It'll take 6 months, a year, 2 years to train them up. But once you do that, those make the best employees, and, you know, it's just overall good for the ecosystem.
Thanks for saying that, because my company, Build Within, that's what it does, is software for apprenticeships. So it's to give people opportunity that do not have the background. But so you have, you said the data matters, and you say there is some things that we can do. So it seems that teams trying to use some of these tools, they have to also use other things. So they try to need to, because they may say we'll never have that data. So how do we actually do something without having that data? It's kind of like the chicken and the egg. So what the products that you build, the solutions that you have, how that, when people buy your products, how do they make a difference in whatever you do using in your field?
Well, they have access to data sets that allow them to fill the gaps of their models, precisely to not get bias into their models. And in this case, we're talking about facial recognition models, voice recognition models that don't recognize dialects. Some of the most typical cases is, it used to be Spanish speakers in the US. Now, data models are better trained with those speakers. And the reason why they were not in the beginning is that they didn't have access to technology like that. Spanish speakers were not able to buy iPhones or more sophisticated smartphones. Now it's been a lot of effort there. Now it's Afro-American dialects, people of color. There's not enough data there, same reason. So there's not enough. So what we do is fill in the gaps of our clients' models to have them recognize more fairly people.
I want to hear from you, Rob, on that too, but the two of you also say what part of your technologies, like takeaways for them here when you were thinking about creating this new company, and you said, I want to make a difference too. I already exited 2 companies in your case. Investors already funded me once or twice or more than one, actually more. It's no problem. I can get this company going. But you said, oh, I'm gonna do something right too. I wanna build good tech. So what are the tips for them if they are working in technologies that sometimes you have to police yourself? What are the practical things that you have to do to make sure that there is no bias in the products that you build, not just hiding and all of that, but actually in the processes? What can they do when they leave this room? What they can live with?
Yeah. I mean, my answer to that is you have to live in the real world. You have to put your products out. You have to user test them with a diverse group of people. You have to listen to them. Too many tech companies live in their little echo chamber of their, white male engineers that think their product's great. For example, we built a digital version of Deepak Chopra, who's a meditation guru. Worked with Deepak to train his AI to meditate with people and coach people on health and all of that. Before we released it, we got a big focus group from people all around the world, and it turns out what, he and his team thought people wanted from a conversational version of him was completely wrong, and they wanted to talk about very different things. And so, we very quickly updated the training sets and adjusted the model to just include more of the things. Some people just want to take him on a walk with him and show him the sights in their city, and that's nothing he would be able to do in real life, but it's something, if you've got 1 billion copies of yourself, you can do. So I think getting into the real world, talking to people, testing your products early on is going to be the best way to create an inclusive product.
Practical tips for them to build products that are conscious of bias, that are inclusive, using artificial intelligence technology.
Well, it's putting the iteration and not being afraid to get the products out early. That is a very cool example that you're mentioning. I think the avatar thing is on rise more and more.
For better or worse, the metaverse is here.
Yes, we did one of myself last year.
Nice.
So because it is one of those things that where you see in our case, our technology behind the scenes, because it's hard to picture data for public or consumers. People don't get what we do very well because you get the application, you don't get the behind the scenes thing, the guts of the AI. So for us, this is the challenge. It's not easy to explain what we do because we are the guts behind the scenes, right? All what kind of data gets into the models, how do you keep the models on check, how do you monitor your AI all the time? But it's about getting the products out as soon as possible and not being afraid of course correcting and improving them, and listen to the public.
Yeah, AI is different than software used to be. It's just experiments. You take a bunch of data, you put it in a network, see what you get, iterate, see what you get, iterate, see what you get. It's not like 20 years ago where I could write code and I knew it worked, and it always worked. It's a very different world.
For companies doing machine learning, when is the right time to create models for a product?
To do what?
When they're using machine learning, data modeling, using machine learning, when is too early, or when is the right time? Because a startup, you're starting, you have a lot of competing priorities. Hiring an ML engineer is expensive. But then if you start gathering data and you don't analyze it correctly, then you have to backtrack. So what's the formula there?
You can go.
First of all, you need to make sure that what you're doing is not out there already. The problem with this area of AI is that there's not many places where the information is very scattered. You can't easily find what is out there that you can leverage and not reinvent the wheel. We are in an era of AI where most of the heavy lifting has been done in terms of understanding the techniques of processing, collecting, and massaging data. We also have developed algorithms that can deal with big data, smaller data, learn as they go. We're always improving, but we have already a lot of techniques in place, synthetic data algorithms that you can use. So I think we are in a world of more of the users of AI now than the big builders, the initial big builders. We're still building, of course, but we're leveraging a lot of the things out there. But there's not many places for someone to start and say, where do I go first to a trusted source of data or tools and models? Where should I? It's a bit of the effort we're doing at Defined.AI is putting together a marketplace of trusted, transparent, responsible assets, where whatever the journey you're doing, you can go there and trust what you're getting.
If people want to use here in the room your products, how do they subscribe to them? Is it API access?
On Defined.AI, you have a marketplace button, and you click on it, and you get into the marketplace. So we are still on year one of this product. We are putting more and more data and more tools and models on it. And a lot of the things that you don't see there are coming up. So that's we're creating a real democratization of access, not just built by us, but built by our partners too, because we believe that takes a village to build responsible AI.
Yeah, and that applies to other industries too. Like in your case, you're also working with journalists to fight some, fake media, fake news. That also opens access of inclusion, because sometimes we just hear the loudest voices on Twitter, for example, and media often takes those voices and then they amplify them, and eventually people are indoctrinated through the media for things that came from Twitter, from just anybody. So tell us, what are you doing on that end with your product?
Yeah, real quick, I'll answer your previous question. When should you do machine learning? To be successful with machine learning, you need two ingredients. You need a bunch of data and people who know how to do something with bunch data. Both of those are very expensive, and startups typically don't have both of those very early on. So gather data, hire good people.
But just a follow-up. So
Yeah.
Notco, the company Notco, the founders, they gathered data, I believe, for like 7 years before they even became known. Now their products are all over, in all the grocery stores. And Karim, the CTO, for what I know, it took him like 7 years. So he was gathering. But today they're paying off for that work. So they did start early.
Yeah.
So how does that work?
I mean,
you have to wait until you have volumes of data, or
I mean, it's maybe ironic for me to say, being from the AI Foundation, I think you can get really far in a startup without AI at all. If you can write down the rules, build some heuristic, fake it till you make it, you can build a product that starts gathering data and adds some value out there and let that go. And it'll collect more and more data. Don't delete data ever unless, you have to comply with some laws. And eventually you'll get to the point where you have a pile of data, and that's when, machine learning starts to get interesting.
You could start as simple as Google Sheets.
Totally. Yeah. A lot of times you can start a business without any technology behind it at all, and that's a better place to start. So many people come to me and say, hey, I want to build an app that does this. Do you need an app? Why don't you just have people call you and you do that for them first to see if anybody even wants to buy such a service or product? So, yeah,
The other question.
to your other question, yeah, synthetic media, I mean, part of the for-profit, nonprofit. So while we're out there generating real-time deepfakes and synthetic voices, the nonprofit side of it, we're leveraging that same technology to detect synthetic media, you know, altered voices, altered images, altered videos, et cetera. And we think those are really important tools to put out to the world, everyone in the world, so you can at least have a clue with what you're looking at. Is that real? Was that modified? Is this really your boss calling you, telling you to wire money to the Caymans or whatever? So those set of tools we think are very important. And what's nice is it's like 80% the same research to generate synthetic media as it is to detect it. So we can kind of put both of those efforts together and get both sides of it.
Great. So I want to give opportunity for questions. Anybody? There is a mic over there at the end. And if you have, I believe, someone else raised their hand here. I think Brian, you can go behind and Stoke is not there.
Okay.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Yep. Introduce yourself and where you come from.
Sure. So, hey, everybody. Justin Schaefer. The kids call me Mr. Fascinate. I do science and technology TV shows. And I really appreciate you all's insights about AI equity and improving diversity in the space. I've been working in the space for a long time. Myself and my friend Maynard here, we've launched a STEM Summit for diverse young professionals. And, you know, we oftentimes, and this is just a personal sentiment, I think we oftentimes feel like a charitable afterthought. You know, like we're, yeah, we forgot, we do have to donate to this diversity thing. I mean, and so with that said, you know, I'm someone that's built businesses in the past, and I know that things are only sustainable if you create economic incentive. And so, you know, from a perspective of an AI practitioner or a funder of an AI initiative, how do we create more economic incentive for diversity initiatives within the context of AI so they don't feel like a charitable afterthought?
Well, can I go first? If you aim at the big companies that are on the spotlight of media, no one wants to have on their reputation a stain around, I miss this group of people. So it's a marketing brand angle that unfortunately sometimes only gathers people's attention when a reporter brings it up and puts, yeah, so that's how, and then of course other companies, but those companies also have a lot more responsibility. They have been accessing to all our data without our consent for decades. Now there's GDPR and there's data privacy laws and things are difficult to build. That's why it's so hard to kickstart a company without the data. But yes, it usually goes like that.
That's a really hard question. I mean, at the end of the day, like transparency in companies is going to help this a lot. If we can start to see end to companies where a more diverse workforce, you know, more inclusion in the culture, et cetera, actually produces better value, happier people, you know, all the metrics are great. So it's not about marketing and branding and, you know, we don't do it for the outside world. We do it because we're creating better products and people are happier doing it. The sooner the world can see that, the more economic upside there's going to be for everybody else in the ecosystem that's helping create that, you know, preparing people to work. It's hard to have a fully inclusive workforce because people, you know, don't agree on much. But that if you can harness the power of that, that's really where there's big economic upside.
And I think the two of you are already making a difference because being in the room is very important. And as a CEO, a founder can do a lot or not do anything. So I always think when there is a problem with the culture of a company, you look at the CEO, what is that person doing? So being entrepreneurs is actually, a really big way to help. And raising your hand and coming up on the mic, making your voice heard is helping. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks everyone. My name is Brian Dawson. Real quick question. 10 million job openings, 10 million unemployed, 13 million or so underemployed. You mentioned that AI might not be quite ready because of the lack of data sets, right? So two-part question. Is AI hurting us right now? Those folks that are using AI for recruiting, for example. Are we limiting the pool of candidates? And number two, what are ways around that? So you mentioned apprenticeships. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you think the role apprenticeships can play in the IT world. Thank you.
I would say our moderator should answer this one.
I'll go last. I'll go last.
Okay. Yeah, look, we're not gonna take somebody who, has no desire to go be a data scientist and turn them into a data scientist. So there's kind of a mismatch here between interest and desire and motivation and needs of companies. So it's not just about pushing everybody into a path that they don't want to go. But I think if we can create, lower barriers to entry to, what does that path look like to get into tech, I think we'll take everybody up many notches and create a lot of room for jobs that, I think frankly people are afraid to take the first step and try. So, that's, to me, it's more about, making it that entry point,
Yes.
achievable.
I would say, yeah, AI on HR is still hurting us unless we have a conscious decision in these teams to have humans in the loop supervising, which is how you train AI anyways. You train AI with a lot of humans first, then it starts to get to learn, you have less humans in the loop until you don't need, you always need them. There's always a 2%, a 3% that there will always be needed human eye on it.
Until we hit singularity, then we don't need humans
exactly.
at all.
And then it's a problem. That's right. But that's right. So it depends on the organization. The problem is a lot of the organizations are so big that to get through all these candidates, they have no other way. The other problem is the applicants. I mean, this is like outbound search of people headhunting. Because if it's per applications, it's known that women don't apply if they don't qualify to 10 of the 10 of the requirements. Or if they don't think they qualify, whereas men, if they have 5 of the 10, they go for it. And that is the problem. Unless you're consciously after candidates that are not even in the pool, which is the hard thing to do, you don't get it. You never get it right.
Yeah, thank you, Rob, for including me to answer this. I believe that we're living in an old paradigm. The paradigm that is one pathway to get a job. You have to go to college, you have to take X number of years working in some company, then go into another, etc. So that's the path. And so whoever is technical is going to do well if he follows that path. That means you have to go to a good elementary school, you have to be in a country that gives you opportunities, etc. It's really hard for immigrants, it's really hard for everybody across the globe. And when you look at the data, it's pretty much everybody is outside of tech. It's not just women, it's not just people of color, it's people older than 40, it's retired, it's the military, I mean, you name it. If you take a 2-year break, even if you're a white male, you're going to have more trouble getting back. Even if you're a white male, if you graduate from history, you're going to have a lot of trouble getting a job at Amazon or Microsoft or whatever. So it's unfortunately because we have this one pathway, and that pathway is not giving us the talent that we need. We have all these openings and new careers that don't require a 4-year degree. In fact, many companies stop doing that and are using apprenticeships because they figure I can have somebody that taught himself like you did, right? Like you have also a non-traditional pathway. They go into the workplace and their degree may not match at all what they're going to do, but the company can teach them some of that. So apprenticeships are the model. Apprenticeships have been used for more than 100 years all over the world. In the U.S., they're regulated. And if you have an electricity company, you are supposed to have apprentices, and the same applies to IT. So now you see a lot of companies starting to create these programs where they lift the requirements and they say, okay, we don't need a person with a 4-year degree for the QA development job, because you can actually learn QA development manual in 3 to 4 months, and you can learn how to use Test Cafe and automation by the end of 1 year. So why do you need to have a college degree, live with a ton of debt, and at the end, you may not find a job, because QA is all about newer technologies too. So there is a huge opportunity on using apprenticeships. I'm biased because my company, Build Within, is software and services for the massification of apprenticeships in technology. We have jobs from blockchain and QA and software development. And we help companies identify great people without these degrees to join those roles. So we find great people that worked as a massage therapist, and now they're a wonderful customer service representative at a SaaS company. So you hear those stories all the time. But I think one of the takeaways for today, and I know we're coming to the end of this, is that you are in the room because you have an interest in this. And you are at the Consumer Electronics Show, which is the largest innovation show in the world. Lots of people didn't come to this show because snow, COVID, all kinds of reasons, and they're all valid, but you're here. And so because you're here, keep attending sessions like this where, because all together we all build technology, we have to humanize it. And all of the jargons about AI and ML and this and that are not necessary to actually create a sound technology. Like he said, you don't need that. She said the same. You can actually start in a Google Sheet. So thank you so much for coming today. Thanks, Rob and Daniela, for taking the time to come here. I think we're very lucky that we have you. Talking about this, you're one of the few leaders in the space, and both of you have a tremendous career. So Rob Meadows and 51, Daniela, 51, Open AI Foundation, and Defined.AI. So follow them on Twitter. You can ask them questions. Thanks, everybody, for coming, and enjoy CES.